Tito Mboweni's funeral has just been announced. He will be laid to rest on Saturday, the 19th of October. Our business reporter Ntokozo Khumalo has traveled to Magoebaskloof ahead of that funeral outside of Tzaneen in Limpopo and joins us now. Just what the mood is like where you are, Ntokozo, where he, of course, grew up and liked spending his time when he wasn't doing the tough work.
Good evening, Mothe. Well, we spent the first half of our day really close by his farm, visiting some of the restaurants that he is known to go and spend some time there if he's not cooking. A rather somber, moods that we were getting, but people very excited to have known him and very excited to be exposed to him. Some people that we spoke to saying he was more of a father to them, when they were serving him at the restaurant, him speaking to them about labor laws, about how the economy works, so that he really wasn't a finance minister or former governor sort of personality, but really a humble human being who really marched to his own drum. And right now, Mothe, we are at the University of Limpopo, where, of course, the former finance minister did deliver a keynote address a few weeks ago. And I am with Victor here, who's representing the university. Thank you so much for talking to us now to just give us some insights into what exactly former Minister Tito Mboweni was talking about at that last keynote that he gave here at the university a few weeks ago. I understand, of course, talking economy.
Good day, Ntokozo. Yes, he was a speaker at the 65 years, the university celebrating 65 years of existence. And we had a week-long celebration. And he was here exactly on the 11th of September, delivering the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba lecture. So it was two of our alumni, most iconic alumni, both the Archbishop and Tito Mboweni, of course. And he was talking about rural livelihoods and sustainability, because that's what the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba lecture that we have been doing for the past 10 years with the foundation is about. And, being Tito, very charismatic, very humorous, and sometimes even provocative, because when he finished, he talked about that state bank. And he said, you can go and tell them I said so. We need a state bank here because there's no way we're going to build agriculture and sustainable livelihoods without the right finance. And he said, I've worked at the central bank. I know what banks look for. And what they do is not what rural agriculture, particularly, or small-scale farming needs, because you need somebody who will be taking a long-term view. And that is what the state bank can do. But most of all, he was just talking generally about economics, the importance of informing yourself, importance of knowing what we are about. But remember, he was also a big advocate of Limpopo. And he has tried his hand at agriculture himself. And he was emphasizing the importance of the province, the centrality, and knowing, of course, how important it is to the exports, the avocados, all kinds of produce that come from this province. He was more on the importance of sustainability that can come from rural livelihoods and importance of getting the right resources and finance or support for the small-scale farmers and agriculture in general.
Certainly. So plenty of land, as you rightfully said here, and we did see on social media him really showcasing that land and the potential of the land. And we hope to certainly speak to some of those entrepreneurs that are working the land. But just what then Tito's legacy means, all that development that you speak to, how do we take the next step?
Okay, let's first of all talk about the legacy, because as a teacher, he looks like the kind of child I would have loved to teach, because he is that child who is intelligent, obviously, no question about that. But intelligence without charisma, without character, without personality will mean nothing. So he's always that. He studied economics, which is one of my favorite.
And right here at the university.
And economic literacy is something that he was always big on. If you listen to him argue, he would always be frustrated by the lack of depth. So he loved debate. He loved to argue. But he wanted to argue with someone who at least could understand the basics. And I felt from time to time when he had a debate, he will end up being almost preachy or teaching people rather than having an argument, which is not what I think he went out to do, but because he wanted to gain insight. Remember, this man was the labor minister. He was part of the negotiation. He was the deputy head of economic policy at the ANC. So from the days of the ANC in exile, and even the days of him as a student here in 1979, 1980, going into Lesotho, but coming back and becoming the finance minister, becoming the governor of the Reserve Bank, his footprint or his fingerprint on the economic landscape of the country and the financial landscape will never be removed, because he was part of the growing edge of society. So every time South Africa was changing, when he was a student, it was changing from apartheid to free. When it was free, he was changing from the legacy of apartheid into a new legacy. When people were talking about, do we go left, do we go right, he was part of the mixed economy policy. And when they were saying, what is the role of central banks, he was right there. Every time he was at the growing edge of society. And that's why his legacy will be indelible.
And going forward, saying, most people seem to agree with the articles that we are seeing, just reflecting on his legacy, that it's hard to even sum up the contribution that he made, making that contribution also with very little controversy. Now, when we came in here, we saw young people wearing, some of them, their political regalia, obviously looking forward to fight for the economy. What legacy then is it for him, and what lessons should they draw out of him in really contributing to their local economy, but also making a voice for themselves on the global stage to ensure that we do see the growth that he was punting for?
Young people should always push the boundaries. They should always challenge the status quo. The difference, and his legacy, of course, is that he did it when it was dangerous, when it was deadly, when it cost him his home, because he had to go into exile not by choice. He had to leave the country because it wasn't sustainable to be himself. I think the legacy is today, young people can be just as irreverent, challenge the status quo, but they don't have to be arrested for it, and they can be part of finding a solution. Because if you are able to, young people will give you imagination, they will give you idealism. That's what we need. We need to dream bigger. And that's what he was doing way back in the 70s and the 80s. Unfortunately, back then it was dangerous. It was illegal in quotes. But then he stayed the course, and he went all the way and came the full circle. So maybe his legacy is that young people like he was in the 70s and 80s are now challenged to ensure that they gain as much insight as possible into how the world works, especially how the economy works, decide that they want to be activists, they want to be change agents, and get involved in it, because he demonstrated that you don't have to agree with everything, but it's insight that's going to take you to the growing edge of any society. Because in the end, people want to be led by those who are a lot more enlightened than they are, and he was definitely part of the enlightened elite.
Well, thank you so much for those insights. I'm sure viewers are left with a lot to think about as they themselves reflect on former Finance Minister Tito Mboweni. Thank you so much for talking to us, Motheo. And of course, I'm sure we'll certainly be meeting and, crossing paths with Victor as we prepare then for the funeral, as you said, now set for the 19th, on Saturday, the 19th of October. So we are still in the community. As I just said, there are some entrepreneurs who told us stories of having to flood former Minister Tito Mboweni with DMs just to get his attention and to get that mentorship from him. And everyone that we've spoken to today, Motheo, saying they did not know him as a former Minister of Labour, as a former Minister of Finance, or this first black South African Reserve Bank governor. They simply knew him as Tito Mboweni, who really did things in his own little way, ordering, soft porridge when it's not on the menu, looking to go fly fishing first thing in the morning before preparing for an international trip to talk about the economy. So I suspect that there's still a lot more stories that we are going to get from this community here in Tzaneen about the former Minister, Motheo.